Hi there, and welcome to this day in history for March 12th. March 12th is the 71st day of the year, 72nd in leap years, in the Gregorian calendar, with 294 days remaining until the end of the year. Today's word is dreadnaught. A dreadnaught is a noun that means a fearless person, or a battleship armed with heavy guns, or a thick cloth, or a garment made with thick cloth, or a type of acoustic guitar with a large body and a loud sound. This word comes to us from Old English root words that mean fear nothing. Earliest documented use of the word dreadnaught is 1573. Now I'd like to take a moment to remind you that links to my research are included in the show notes, and ask you to go ahead and click that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. Feel free to share this video with others so your friends will know what you know. And with that, we're going to start in the year 1832, when the English farmer and land agent Charles Boycott was born. Now, by land agent, I mean that he was sort of an estate manager for a wealthy landowner in Ireland. One of his responsibilities was to collect rents from the tenant farmers, of which he got to keep 10%. Boycott had developed some rather rigid ideas about how things ought to be done, and he also had some ideas about, boss-type people being superior to the workers. This thought pattern did not actually serve him all that well, as we shall see. Come 1880, there had been a poor harvest, and so the landowner for whom Boycott actually worked had agreed in advance to a 10% reduction in rents for the tenant farmers. When he went around to collect the rents, some of the farmers were asking for a 25% reduction in rents. He said that he had spoken to the property owner, but we don't really know that for sure. But a reduction in rent means a smaller 10% piece for him, but they couldn't pay their rent. So he began eviction proceedings against some of the tenant farmers. Now, similar to today, they had to be served with papers. This was to be, at that time, served either to the head of house or his spouse. So they started this project of serving eviction notices on the tenant farmers. The first three went okay, but the fourth one it was a woman, and she wasn't having it. She wouldn't accept the papers. She started waving a red flag to let other people know, that something was going on over here, and people came running to her aid, and they began throwing mud and manure and maybe rocks, I don't remember, at the process servers. I'm sure that wasn't any kind of fun for them. So they skedaddled on out of there, and they tried to come back the next day, and they didn't have any more success. So his eviction process was stymied. Now, another thing, in addition to his rigidity of thought about how things were according to his way of thinking, was that he was an Englishman in Ireland. And in those times, the Irish were not treated well, shall we just say. The Irish were not treated well by the English. So there was kind of a class warfare mentality going on there. Then there came to be a wage dispute between himself and his own employees. He had people working for him, too, on his part of the land. By and by, his employees quit working for him, leaving him to do everything himself. No easy task. So when his employees left him to do it all himself and kind of put him in a bind, and no one would go to work for him. And before you know it, the postmaster quit delivering his mail. The blacksmith wouldn't serve him, nor the laundress. And before long, the shopkeepers in town wouldn't do business with him either. I mean, it was a real shunning. So he wrote back to England about his situation, kind of whining and complaining about how these people were treating him. It was all his own doing. But they felt sorry for him, so they sent some I think they were actually soldiers that they sent over to help him. And first of all, they sent way too many, he didn't need nearly that. He just wanted somebody to help him get his crops out of the field. But they sent these folks over to help him. Finally, he realized, that he was just going to have to leave. This wasn't working for him at all. You can't live in a community where no one will do business with you. You have to be able to get along with the people around you. And so he decided to leave, and they tried to hire a carriage. No one would drive it. They got a carriage, but no one to drive it. And so finally they got an army ambulance to take him and his family to the railway station, and they went to Dublin. Well, people in Dublin even knew about this guy. They went to a hotel. They were planning to stay at this hotel for about a week, but the hotel had already received mail. They'd received letters saying, "Your hotel will be boycotted if he continues to stay there." So they went ahead and left and went back to England. And as much as I've told you about that story, there is even more, but I have other things to tell you, so we're going to wrap this up. So, Charles Boycott died in 1897 at the age of 65, and now you know something about boycotting and how that word got its origin. Back to why I'm even telling you about this is that this was the birthday of Charles Boycott, March 12th, 1832. So now let's move on to Coca-Cola. When it first came out, it was only available as a fountain drink. Did you know that? Some innovative geniuses realized that they could sell a whole lot more of it if they could get it in a bottle, and by golly, they were right. So Coke was first developed in 1886, and it wasn't until March 12, 1894 that it was available in bottles. In 1912, the Girl Guides, later renamed the Girl Scouts of the USA, were founded in the United States on this day in 1912. On March 12, 1918, Moscow became the capital of Russia again after St. Petersburg had held this status for most of the period since 1713. This is the birthday of American author and poet Jack Kerouac, born March 12, 1922. Also the birthday of American captain, pilot, and astronaut Wally Schirra, born March 12, 1923. Apparently not having learned the lesson from losing the American colonies in the Revolutionary War, which involved at least in part a rigged forced market and unreasonable high taxes, you have to buy this from us, and oh, by the way, we're going to charge you a lot of taxes for it too. Britain had imposed a set of laws known as Britain's Salt Acts that prohibited Indians from collecting or selling salt. Now, salt, as you know, is a mineral that adds flavor to our food. In addition to that, it's used for food preservation, and it's actually necessary for health. A lot of people go on a low salt or salt-free diet, but if they were completely devoid of salt, they would be in bad shape. So some is necessary for health. In those days, Britain had passed these Salt Acts, which required Indians to buy all their salt from Britain, thereby exercising a monopoly over the manufacture and sale of salt, and, oh, by the way, while we're at it, levied a heavy tax on it as well. And so it is that the great Indian independence leader Mohandas Ghandi saw a great opportunity to lead a nonviolent, massive act of civil disobedience, and organized a march to the sea with the ultimate goal of making salt from seawater. He set out with 78 followers on March 12, 1930, on a 241-mile march to the Arabian Sea. Of course, he addressed crowds along the way, and by golly, their numbers grew to tens of thousands. Ghandi was in direct defiance of the British Salt Acts when he simply reached down and picked up a little clump of salt on the beach. He was soon joined by Indian citizens making salt from seawater. Millions became involved. The movement was unstoppable, really. British authorities arrested more than 60,000 citizens for being in defiance of the Salt Acts. Now, there's more to that story too, but maybe we can revisit this one at another time. On March 12, 1933, President Franklin D. Roosevelt gave his first national radio address, or Fireside Chat, broadcast directly from the White House. This was way before television, so these were radio broadcasts. He deliberately used simple vocabulary and folksy anecdotes or analogies to be more relatable to everyday citizens, and also so that those citizens could easily understand what he meant. Even the term fireside chat was coined to invoke the image of a president sitting by the fire in a living room, speaking earnestly to the citizens. It really gave people the feeling that he was talking directly to them. On March 12, 1938, Germany annexed Austria. Beneficial for Germany, not so great for Austria. After the end of World War II, Austria's independence was reestablished, and the chancellor, who had first been bullied into handing the country over and then imprisoned to keep from taking it back, was released from prison. On March 12, 2003, the World Health Organization officially released a global warning of outbreaks of severe acute respiratory syndrome, also known as SARS. March 12, 2009, financier Bernard Madoff, he made off with a bunch of people's money. Bernard Madoff pled guilty to one of the largest frauds in Wall Street's history. Ruined a lot of people's lives. On this day in 2011, a reactor at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant exploded and released radioactivity into the atmosphere a day after the 2011 Tohoku earthquake and tsunami. And I think that's going to do it for us today. As always, links to my research are included in the show notes. Thank you so much for watching. Give it a like if you enjoyed this video. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share so that your friends know what you know. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time. All right. Okay, we gotta make that go to sleep. We'll do that in a minute. I wrote that awkwardly. Now, how are we gonna do that? All right, let's back that up just a little bit. The Volkswagen microbus, so many mistakes. I don't know how all that's gonna go together, or if it's even gonna make it to the video. We'll just see. That's not gonna go. Probably cut all that out. That'll all be laying on the cutting room floor. So I'll just do that whole thing over. That might not make it into the video. We'll see. Changing it up.